to influence geo, you need to influence two things. So you need to influence first. How do you get in the model weights, which is harder to control? The other thing is those models, basically the way that they're working and generating answers is still going to the web, right? They're going and searching. So if you're not ranking in those top 10 results, you're not going to be cited either.
Welcome to the Talking AI podcast, where we talk AI with both experts in the field and early adopters. I'm your host, Matt Page, and we're here to demystify AI for you so you can get some value from it. Let's talk some AI. Search is being rewritten for agents and not humans. While LLMs are amazingly capable without live, reliable web context, they hallucinate or they just fall hopelessly out of date. At the same time, we have this massive inflection point where consumers are abandoning the 10 blue link Google search routine and asking ChatGPT, Perplexity, and other AI tools to find answers. And that shift is completely changing SEO, and it's spawning a new discipline, which some are coining Generative Engine Optimization or Answer Engine Optimization. Pick your favorite, we'll see who wins. Because what matters now is how content is interpreted by LLMs and AI agents, and not just how it ranks. And our guest, Thias, and her company, Exa, sit at the center of this upheaval with a massive goal to create a different type of search, and one that's actually understanding the meaning behind all of the websites on the internet, and one that's tailored for agents. Welcome to the show, Thias.
Thank you so much. Super excited to be here.
Yeah, this is going to be fun. I'm going to hit you with a big question out of the gate. Is SEO dead?
Everyone keeps asking me this. SEO is not dead. And I guess we'll get into all the details of it. But I think what a lot of people miss is where are all of these AI chats getting their actual data? Yeah. And ChatGPT is still searching Bing if you think about it. So if you're not winning the SEO game, you're not going to win the GEO game either, is a little bit of the answer. It's almost a prerequisite. We can jump into all the details later though.
Yeah, I like that point because our CEO keeps going to this because we keep showing up in AI searches. And he's like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "I don't know." Because I think the principles of like trust, authority, relevance, like those things still count. But I'll give you a couple interesting use cases that I've heard lately. One is 10Ks, companies' annual reports and things like that. Companies are literally starting to write those tailored for AI and agents because they know, what do you do? Nobody's reading through that huge document. They're going to go dump it into some AI tool so it can research it, right? So those live on the web. So they're trying to tailor it for that. And then I saw another interesting use case, a large bank, and I'm not going to mention the name, but they were having, somebody just asked, what do you think about X bank, right? Just to see what would happen in an AI search. And it came back with all these negative comments. And what they found is it was going and referencing review sites and things like that. So it was like their smaller branches, one-off bad reviews were causing them to show up bad in the AI search, which is like just an interesting shift, I think.
I think what no, you're so right. And I think what a lot of companies will have to realize is they're not going to be so in control anymore. Right? Because those AIs are smart and obviously like researching the web in all sorts of ways that are not so controllable by you. So they will be fetching information that sometimes you don't put out or that is in news articles or reviews to your point, and you won't have control over that information. So what can you control? And I don't know if it would be helpful to give a quick overview of the differences between SEO and GEO, but I think
if you want to hit that now, that'd be a good thing to hit. And then I think too, for context, what is Exa for people? Because you'll have an API that's like helping do this. Maybe hit that piece first so we have the context there. And then let's like dive into this new discipline that's emerging.
That sounds great. For those not familiar with Exa, we're basically building the first search engine that is made for AI agents. So Google, Bing, we're all built for consumers and for an age in which us people were going on the web and searching, and obviously we're lazy, so we search in keywords. We don't write full complex paragraphs explaining what we want. But now we're moving towards a world in which AI agents and think ChatGPT or even more complex products will be doing the search on our behalf. So we're actually asking ChatGPT for an answer, and then they will go ahead and research the web. So how do we optimize the search engine for that, basically? And the whole principle behind Exa is we're the first search engine that can actually understand the meaning behind all of the documents across the web and can return content that's super relevant for those AI questions and in a way that's much simpler for the AI to basically process and be able to absorb all of that information. So instead of our search being optimized for SEO and for consumers like Google has been, we're way more trying to be as relevant as possible for those AI so that they can be grounded and they don't hallucinate and they have access to kind of the best data.
Yeah, and there was some cool, I'm trying to think, I think it was Open Router was one of your customers using your product and some different ones. Like, how are
Yeah,
they using it? And maybe some other interesting use cases. 'Cause I think this is like a new, it's almost like a new discipline tool, whatever you want to call it, for companies in the future. And how do you use it as one
for
thing that
sure.
people need to be educated on?
So basically, our main product's an API, which basically we plug into companies' products to become that source of data from the web. So for OpenRouter, for example, what's super cool is they have over 400 LLM models, and some of them
Yeah,
are not usually connected to the web. We basically partner with them, and now all of those models can access the web via Exa. So they can basically send a prompt to Exa, and then we go fetch that data, return it to that model. So now any
that's
LLM
cool.
really can be grounded with web data, which is super cool. We also have some other really interesting customers. So from large search engines such as Ecosia, helping power a lot of the AI answer generation for them, or even big consulting firms, big banks, tech companies that want to not only pull from your internal data, let's say think productivity tools or even CRMs. Not only do they want to be able to pull from internal data, but also enrich that data, right? Imagine if you have a CRM filled with customers, and if you could already have written there, okay, who are their competitors? What are recent news about them? So we're partnering with also like sales enablement tools, recruiting tools, and a lot of tech companies to basically become that data source that's infused throughout their product or in AI
Yeah,
features within their product.
nice. That's cool. Okay, we got the context now. So let's go back to
Yeah.
SEO, GEO. I've heard AEO. I've
Yeah.
heard there's some other acronyms I've heard, but first of all, which one do you like the most? And then give me the breakdown of like how it's
Yeah.
different.
I've been using GEO because I
Okay.
think it goes beyond just answer generation in a lot of ways. I think we're going
Yeah.
to start seeing AI be infused through all sorts of products that sometimes are not that clear answer format always, right? Sometimes it's baked into a larger feature. So I like GEO, but I think for those less familiar with it, the TLDR is GEO is essentially how do you optimize your content in your website so that it gets picked up by AI
Yeah.
answers and gets cited by them. So I think the major difference is instead of just trying to show up in the top results of Google or Bing, you're trying to be a source that's actually directly mentioned and quoted by those AIs. And we're already starting to see a bunch of companies mentioning how a significant portion of their traffic is actually coming from Claude. ChatGPT mentions, I think Guillermo from Vercel actually mentioned recently that I think over 4 or 6% of their traffic was already coming from ChatGPT mentions, which is
46 or 4 to 6?
no, I think it's 4 to 6
Okay. I
percent is coming
was
from
about to say,
ChatGPT,
wow.
but increasing every month. Like that's a lot.
Yeah.
So I think it's something that we're obviously in the early stages and still somewhat fully unclear all the things that come into play to influence that. But I think some things we already do know. What's interesting is to influence GEO, you need to influence two things. So you need to influence first. How do you get in the model weights, which is harder to control? So things like ChatGPT, for example, the cutoff is October 2023. Unless you were relevant in October 2023, tough to get around that. The other thing is those models, basically the way that they're working and generating answers is still going to the web, right? They're going and searching. In the case of ChatGPT, they're using Bing, for example. So if you're not ranking in those top 10% top 10 results,
Yeah.
you're not going to be cited either. So there are things that you need to do specifically within your content to make it super like short and clear and have headlines that AI will be able to snap up. But if you're not showing up in those top results in the first place, forget it. You're not going to be in the game to begin with.
Yeah. It's like you mentioned, that's the key thing. It's okay. If I can just get on the first page, I'm good. Somebody's going to scroll. But like with this, like you're lucky to get in a list because sometimes it's just, hey, here's my response. But that's what's one thing that, and I'd say that this past quarter, it's crazy. We like, I think 20% of our inbound, because we have just an open field in our inbound form that's like, how did you hear about us? And about 20% is some AI tool.
Wow.
And we're trying to understand, okay, what did you ask the AI tool? But some of them I've noticed it's like the cross between I'm looking for X in this geography. And there's things we have that put us squarely in that spot. So I think that's one angle. But you mentioned the point around like making content that's easy for LLMs to consume. Like one thing that always comes to mind is like question answer type of stuff. That's if somebody has a question they're going to ask, make it very clear and explicit somewhere on your site. So it's very easy for the LLM to go grab it and then just return that back to the customer. I guess that's one
Yeah.
example. Any other, because I'm thinking like for teams that cover content and stuff like that, like
Mhm.
where do they begin to optimize so they do start showing up in these different search results?
Yeah. So I think for content, for let's say thinking about the content within those pages, I think the question answer format works great. Also, very clear headlines and then short Matt's like 3 lines that kind of contain that core piece of information that you want.
Yeah,
Another thing that I'm hearing a lot is actually numbers. So including data and
really.
including almost like micro case studies within your content can help a lot because AI likes to pick on a piece that it considers like meaty information. It's the
Mhm.
opposite of sometimes what I think traditional SEO blogs used to be, which were very fluffy, very repetitive, repeating the same keyword over and over again. It seems like for GEO, it's better for you to have actually a breadth of words that are related to that topic,
Mm.
but that feel slightly distinct, and that the content actually feels meaty, concise, direct, and has like good data points, good little analogies, like things that you as a human would also want to quote, right? If you come out of this
Yeah.
podcast, like what is a quote you're going to remember? AI works in a similar logic where it has to pick like something that's self-contained and has a lot of meaty information.
No, it's perfect. It's funny as you're talking, I'm like asking ChatGPT on the side. It's give me the key things for like GEO and AEO and whatnot. A couple of interesting ones that it said. Let's see. Optimizing for featured snippets, zero click answers. That's interesting. So it's like direct, easily accessible, and then speed and clarity over long form SEO bloat. So like in the past, it's okay, let's stuff a million keywords into this thing. It's super long. It's
Yeah.
painful for humans to read. And I guess it's also painful for LLMs to read. So like that
Yeah.
may be the opposite of what you want in the future. But the one that's interesting to me is they say using schema markdown where possible for structured data. And it was some video or something I was looking at related to image generation. And that's the tough thing. It's like, how do you get consistent images? And the way this person was doing it was they were reverse engineering it. They had an image, they fed it to whatever AI tool,
That's so
ChatGPT,
cool.
Claude, and said, give me the JSON describing this image. So then it like created JSON that very clearly defined the image. And then you had the like attributes that you could tweak that's you could feed back in and do that. So
That's super cool.
I wonder in the future, and you mentioned this like when we were chatting before, like you wonder if the internet's going to shift to being less for humans and more for AI and agents.
Completely.
And we're just, okay, I need this. And then it's going off doing the thing. What
Yeah.
does that future look like, I guess, in a sense?
Yeah. So that's a great question. I think we're definitely betting on that future. And I think obviously as humans, we're always going to gravitate to things like social media, and there's always going to be places within the internet that are still very human first. But in
Yeah.
terms of content, it almost will be intermediated by an AI, right? We're likely going to be
Yeah. Yeah.
wanting something that's more personalized or more curated to our tastes or to our questions. So we don't want to go read a whole gigantic article to then go find the one sentence that matters to us. We're likely going to ask an AI agent to then go fetch that on our behalf. So I think you're spot on. And I think the internet will start being optimized for AI agents. And we're seeing this even now with things like MCPs, right? I think we talk about this internally a lot, but I think for the dot-com boom, if you miss the mark on SEO, like you lost huge opportunities. And I think for agents, you also need to get your products to a state that they're very easily utilized by AI agents. So MCPs are one way for that to happen. Geo is another way. But I think, yeah, how do you make it easily navigatable and easily actionable also by AI agents? I think will shift a lot in the next years.
Yeah, and MCPs, if anybody's curious, what is that? And that's been a very hyped up thing as of
Mhm.
late. So we have a whole Hatrix AI lab going deep in that topic. But in general, like it's just a way to make it easy for LLMs to use tools to access things, right? It could
That's
be
right.
any number of things. It's just, it almost feels like it's like the connective tissue, almost like the APIs for LLMs in a sense, even though
Yeah.
LLMs use APIs too, but it's like,
No, but that's
synonymous
exactly
to that.
right. It's basically an API that requires less integration and that they can proactively basically seek
Yeah.
out. So you're almost exposing it and making it easy for them to fetch it.
And this just triggered something in my head. I think it was maybe the Greg Eisenberg podcast. He was talking, I think it may have been Riley Brown, and they were on this topic. But that's, I think, the thing that's going to change too is things are going to require less physical code and more natural language in a sense. With it's almost like giving context to the LLM. Here's how you should use my website. Here's how you should navigate my website. And you can give that in Markdown, which is just natural language, easy to read. But I think that's the next step too. It's just if somebody's coming to your house, it's like, hey, here's where the bathroom is. Here's
Here are
the
the
burgers
ground
are
rules.
outside. Exactly. I think that's another thing that's going to emerge. I don't know. Any thoughts on that? Or is there, we haven't done this personally. It's what's the effective way to do it? It almost feels like meta tags and things like that in the SEO world. This is like the new version of that
Yeah,
in a
for sure.
sense.
I think the obviously allowing the crawling to happen. So like allowing robot
Yeah.
stock text to actually crawl your site is imperative. But I think, yeah, having that markdown and like really structured content is, I think,
Hmm.
what we're going to gravitate towards. I think a lot of those websites that used to be almost like overly designed and where text wasn't displayed in such a clear way might actually hinder a lot of geo and a lot of the way that these AIs are searching. So I think that's one piece. But what's interesting is so this is more for, let's say, consumer use cases, right? Where you're seeing
Hmm.
a person going to ChatGPT asking a question. I think what's interesting is our customers tend to actually want to use Exa because it's not gameable necessarily by SEO and GEO. So if let's say you're a business and you want the best data to be funneled into your systems or into your product, Exa can almost, it breaks the logic of SEO because we actually embed the whole document. So we can understand the full context of all of that document and give you those matches based on relevance. So there's almost like no way for people to game our system and try to optimize this for SEO, let's say, because we are already taking that whole context into account. Obviously, the things that work for geo will also be great for that because it just makes it clear. But the TLDR is really, you have to be as clear and concise and direct as ever. And AIs tend to love that. So I think we're
Yeah.
definitely going to see a movement in that direction.
You just made enemies with a lot of marketers all around the world trying to game the system.
I know.
And fans of
Uh,
businesses that are trying to avoid that. So I guess the other point too, actually, hold on one second.
and by the way, maybe I
Top
can
of
give
my
an
head.
example on that actually while you pull this up, just in case
Yeah,
it's
go.
helpful. So for example, how would a search traditionally work on Google versus how does it work on Exa? So let's say you're trying to find interesting AI startups based in San Francisco working on robotics. If you type that on Google or Bing right now, you'll basically get like an article about companies and then a Reddit thread and then a blog post, but you're not going to get the list of companies when what you're asking
Yeah,
for is actually the list of companies. So X is very good at understanding that intent and returning to you exactly what you want. So we would basically be able to read those companies' websites, understand that they're matching what you're asking for and returning those company homepages. So it's just much cleaner. And for an AI, they need that primary data source, right? A blog, an article, a Reddit thread is almost like overly processed information instead of
yeah.
being the primary source of it. Excel works great to return that primary source and more of that meaty content that we're talking about. So I think that's just one example query of how that would work differently.
So more of a valuable result. And I'm curious, like, how do you
Yeah.
view the competitive landscape right now? Because it's insane. Like you'd mentioned that the Bing search API is getting deprecated. You have that going on right now. Obviously,
Oh my God.
there's
Yeah.
tools like Perplexity that are trying to own AI search. They're more on the consumer side of things, obviously. But how do you view this competitive landscape that's starting to emerge?
Yeah. So I think there's two sides to it, right? You have the consumer search and then you have B2B search. So I think for us,
Hmm.
basically the Bing API got deprecated. Google doesn't really have a public API. So it was actually interesting because we saw a huge inflow of customers following the Bing deprecation,
Really? Yeah.
which still all need access to web data. And I think the move that Bing did was they basically removed their public API and moved people onto more of this black box type of search within Azure, where people can already request a search, but it has a bit of that LLM pre-processing. So it just doesn't give developers that much control. And I think Exa moves a lot more in the direction of, okay, let's give you a lot of control. Developers can choose whatever they want. So I think for B2B, we're seeing actually a lot less options happening in the market, and very few companies are investing in foundational search infrastructure, like training and building their own models like we are. On the consumer side, I think it's really interesting what's happening here. And I'm very curious on how this will evolve, because the ChatGPTs of the world, Perplexity and Claude, are all stealing search from Google. And even within Google, I'm actually dying to hear the discussions between the head of Gemini and the head of Google Ads, because they're directly competing for traffic. And I think as these companies evolve, we'll also need to see, how do their business models change, and how do you create incentives for people to go towards these AI products without taking huge hits on revenue and not being able to monetize a lot of those consumer requests. I'm super curious on how that will evolve.
It's funny too. On the Google side, I was a part of their early product research program or whatever with their AI mode. And you could see they're trying to like encroach on this ChatGPT feel.
Yeah.
But the interesting point you made is like they are facing the biggest innovator's dilemma probably of all time, because their whole business is, obviously it's a very profitable business across tons of business units, but their ad revenue is huge and the margins are insane. And if you all of a sudden say, hey, I'm just going to return this AI return answer and you can't really do the ads, what happens there? I'm sure they're going to come up with some new version of ads and whatnot. What that'll be, who knows? But
I think that's a really interesting point, because one thing so obviously in the last, let's say 2 years, is when these AI chat apps really blew up. And I think they started from a place of building a lot of trust actually with consumers, right? I think consumers right now really trust ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, et cetera, because it doesn't feel like they're incentivized to sell them anything or push anything specific, and there are no ads.
For now.
But that's the thing. I think I'm also super curious on what will happen to consumer trust if these apps have to start pushing ads. Because on Google, it's super clear like what's an ad versus what's not an ad, versus for an answer, it might start feeling a little bit weird for consumers to then trust what that AI model is telling them if they're incentivized to recommend specific things and not others. So I don't know how they're going to solve that. It's obviously a really tough problem. I think for Google especially, they have one of the most beautiful business models of all time with ads, but it seems like they're going in a direction of self-disruption, which I think is smart, because it would happen anyway. So it might as well be to themselves and then figure out the revenue or ad piece within Gemini later.
Yeah, they almost have to. But I'll give you my like analogy for it. And it's based on 2 movies. It's like The Truman Show and I think it's Minority Report. And if you remember The Truman Show, like they have ad placements and Truman has no clue, right? They're trying to sell something. He's like, why are you holding this can opener so weird or whatever? And the Minority Report, it's like when he's walking in somewhere, it knows who you are. It's like trying to sell you this exact thing. So who knows? Maybe that'll be our future one day. But I think the interesting thing also is not only how companies are thinking differently about search and how they appear in search, the consumer behavior is changing too, not only where they go to search, but what they're searching for and how they're searching. Because like for me, the way I use AI is completely different than how I use Google. Like I can't tell you how many conversations I have where it's about thinking through something strategically, planning something, outlining something, doing a lot of deep research. Like we're doing, and this is a segue into the WebSets tool you have, but like research on finding prospects in a specific niche, or maybe you're in recruiting and doing things like that. There's so many different types of searches that are beginning to emerge. Like, how do you think that's going to evolve over time?
Great question. So first, I think, by the way, I think you're in the minority of users still, and you're ahead of the curve, which makes total sense. But the majority, I saw,
which I got to remind myself of, and you're probably the same way, right? Because like I'm in it every day, so I just assume everybody else is too, and then I'll go do a training or workshop, and I'm like, oh my god, it's like people just still haven't figured this out yet.
Exactly, and I think right now we're in this phase of retraining of mass consumer behavior. I think people have been trained over a decade, right, on like how to prompt Google and intuitively how to prompt Google at this point. And I think now people are going through this mass retraining phase of how to actually prompt ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini and get the most out of it. And I think the style of searching, obviously, it's a lot more longer form. And I think that is a big shift. You're going to start seeing way longer queries, way more context. So you don't need as much of that guesswork as Google has to do with keywords, which is why Google leans so heavily on keywords, because people type in a very keywordy way as well. So I think
Yeah.
with these tools, consumers are going to learn to give more context and give more depth to what they want and more direction. So these AIs can then, I think, give more informed answers, but also the way that then these AI agents will go and search the web is also with longer queries, which goes a little bit back to what we're talking in the beginning of even how geo is different than SEO. I think longer queries is a huge part of this, and way more like longer tail keywords versus those like super broad generic keywords. I think we're going to lean
Yeah.
way more heavily on the long tail now.
Yeah. And for everybody listening right now, you mentioned context. That's one of the number one things I talk to people about. Like, context is king. If you provide sufficient context, I almost feel like you can do anything with AI. It may
Yeah,
take time, but if you give it enough context, like, it'll do some crazy cool things. Yeah, that's a good point. Like, queries, they're more nuanced, they're longer, they're deeper,
mhm.
it's almost like you're working with another human
Yeah,
versus like this like task jockey that's like, get that, bring it back.
exactly.
Okay, let me review
Like,
it.
like
What?
I'll give you an example of recruiting, because we obviously we see a lot of use cases for recruiting, especially on the websites product. But imagine if a new recruiter joins your team and you just tell them, engineer, hire, and that's all you say. Like, of course they're gonna
Yeah,
do a bad job at it because you're not giving it enough context. But if you're like, oh, okay, so we're trying to hire the software engineer that needs experience in startups and big tech, and I want them to be phenomenal at coding in Rust and be super strong on backend. And if they have published technical blogs before, even better.
yeah.
That's a
And review their
completely
GitHub
different.
profile and see what they've done and all that kind of stuff, right?
Exactly. So I think obviously, like, you would get a completely different result. And it's the same with AI. I think we see this, like, the more specific people can be with descriptions, the better results they get. And obviously to a level, right? Because you also can't describe something that like doesn't exist and is like so many different criteria that it's almost impossible to find. But yeah, I think that context matters a lot.
So you mentioned web sets. So, like, obviously you have
Hmm.
the API, that's your core product, but with web sets, you essentially took X of the API and built a product around it, which is actually really cool. I think you're going to show off a little bit of it now. So if you're listening on Apple or Spotify, we'll be very descriptive, but if you want to go watch it on YouTube, you can actually see it live there.
Yeah. So I guess just some quick context on what websets is. So
Yep.
basically, we have the search API, and we saw a lot of our customers actually using it to build internal tools. So to build tools for
Mm,
sales, for recruiting, for investing, for market research, because Excel was so good at finding people, companies, and these very semantic heavy things. So we're like, huh, this is interesting. Why don't we actually just go build this as a tool that anyone can use and prompt, and that we can basically use a lot more compute and do a lot more queries in the backend to solve very complicated things. So it can solve queries like, for example, if you want to find every single startup in the United States that has raised more than $25 million and has a technical founder and a product that's B2B, you can prompt it literally in that way, and it would return you a list of perfect results that match exactly that criteria by basically going and researching a bunch of different sources throughout the web to validate that's true. It's cool because the whole web becomes your source of data. And
yeah.
it's not just like a stale database or something that we need to update to keep that up to speed. It just like live searches the web and is able to figure out, does it match, does it not match what you're looking for, and return you perfect list. So that's a little bit about the
Yeah, that's
product, but
awesome.
I can share my screen quickly and we can go through an example. Okay, cool. So let me give you an example of something that's would be probably impossible to find on LinkedIn or Google or anything of sorts. So we had a customer that was like, okay, I want to sell sports sponsorships and I want to find founders and CMOs of consumer goods companies that used to play college sport themselves because I want them to be sporting and get the value of this.
Oh,
So I want to
yeah.
figure out if they played college sports, what sport they played, and what was the exact name of the team that they played for. So let's try that example. So if you go CEOs and CMOs of consumer goods companies in the US that
It
played
just blows my
college
mind that AI
sports.
can do this
I know.
nowadays in this like natural language type of way.
So it basically breaks down your criteria. You see a little preview, just like gut check if this is correct. And then you can click search.
And then you could tweak that before you actually kick it off, in a sense,
Yeah,
if you
you
wanted
can
to.
tweak this. You can choose however many results you want. We've had customers that pulled like 50,000 results. This can be quite comprehensive depending on what you're searching for.
Oh, wow.
Let me give this a minute to load. So here's this example. So we basically went ahead and found a bunch of people that fit this criteria. And whenever you click into the criteria, you can see all the different sources that this pulls from. It's cool because it's not just pulling from LinkedIn, right? They don't even have to explain that their company is a CPG or a consumer goods company. We can go research that company, figure out if it matches that criteria and be like, yeah, this matches. And then we can go and figure out, did this person play college sports? So even if they didn't mention it on their LinkedIn, we can go and figure out, okay, what was the baseball roster of this college where they mentioned, and return this information. So then you can even go ahead and add a bunch of enrichments, which is really cool. So enrichments basically just means that you can run another LLM search to fetch specific information you're interested in. So let's say if you want their email, or you want a summary about their career, or you want the college they played at, etc. So
using
here
AI just to append more data to the data set, essentially.
That's right. So this basically uses a combination of an AI agent and then Exa search to basically run in a loop until it finds the information you're looking for. So if I typed find me their email, the AI would prompt, okay, go find the email, and we would do that search, etc. So it's super cool, and you can prompt all of this in very natural language. So here I said tag them by what college sport they played, and they return here tagging them by baseball, football, soccer, etc. The college that they played at, and even like the name of the college team. So if you're then writing an email to this person, you can be like, hey, saw that you played at XYZ, would love to talk to you about the college, like how we can do the sponsorship together, blah, blah, blah. I know you're an athlete. So you can basically just use this to customize. And we can run another example here of an enrichment. So we can even say something like, give me a summary of their career trajectory.
And then you could just feed this into whatever AI tool you want to create custom messaging based on the data, essentially.
Yeah, so you can integrate this directly with things like Clay, HubSpot, Salesforce, or use this to send emails, or download this as a CSV. So it's super cool. So you can see this populating here, and a whole little summary pops up. It's cool because you can see then all this information compiled. Yeah, it's very nuanced, which is the beauty of AI, right? You can pick up on the subtleties. It doesn't have to be a exact category that was bucketed in a specific way, or a keyword that you're using. It can pick up on that. So it captures a lot of that nuance that we, like you as a person, you would know. I can give you a super simple example, but let's say I wanted CEOs and CMOs. Their titles could oftentimes be like chief marketing officer instead of CMO. And you as a person would be able to look at this and get it, that it's the same thing. Something like a LinkedIn search would not be able to do that. So it's cool because here you can just type it as you would for a person, and we figure it out for you.
The crazy thing is how quickly the people that have adopted this, just it becomes the new baseline in their mind. Because if you think back to how long this would have taken a human to do, to, okay, let me go do a big long LinkedIn search and painfully throw that into an Excel sheet. Okay, now let me go search each individual person on Google and find the nuance about like where they play sports and things like that. It's just crazy how efficient this is. And I just got a feeling like it's amazing how quickly we're just not impressed with stuff that used to be, even like a year ago, like completely impossible.
No, completely. And I think that's the thing. That's why I think we've been talking a lot about this consumer retraining, right? And even knowledge worker retraining, because things that were not possible before are now possible. And you need to almost expand your mind into what can I do and what can these tools enable me to do? And you can get so creative with it. And I think the more you use it, the more you get it and can get super creative with how to implement it on your day-to-day. Another interesting thing here, for example, is you can monitor the web live. So let's say you have someone that is not a CMO yet. Maybe they're a manager at one of these companies, but suddenly they become the CMO, they get promoted. So you can actually consistently scan the web and monitor for new people that match your criteria. So, right, imagine if you're an investor that wants to be the first to find new founders that went into stealth, or you want to reach out to companies as soon as they fundraise. You can set this up and not even have to like consistently run these searches. It scans it for you. So things that even before would require not just time, but also a lot of that speed, this can also automate, which is super cool. And I think AI will become a lot more proactive in this sense also over
Yeah.
time and predict what you want and already fetch that for you instead of just being responsive to what you're asking for.
Yeah, that's the beauty of agents. They kind of work in this model of observe, reason, and then act. Observe, reason, act, observe, reason, act until they figured
Yeah.
out, okay, I got what I need. And it was the example you mentioned earlier, going through LinkedIn. Okay, now let me go search the web to figure out look at the baseball roster or something, and I'm going to do this. And it just keeps going until it's done. It's just loops in a sense with AI in there, given a
Yeah.
purpose and access to tools, and it like can do insanely cool things when you start to do that.
It's super cool. And yeah, I think that's exactly it. That's why that context that we talked about before is so important, right? Because you need to make its mission really clear. So I think obviously in more consumer chat applications like ChatGPT, you as the consumer need to give that context every time you prompt of what's the goal. But then in products like websites, we almost bake that into the logic of the product so that the user doesn't even have to think about it. So we already can predict what the user wants, and we give those instructions to the AI in the back end so that it can run those loops, even with little-ish context, let's say. So I think as these flows start also being more productized, we will be able to anticipate a lot of those consumer needs and already bake them into the back end of how these products are working.
Yeah, that's crazy. All right, last question I got for you. What is your favorite AI product tool besides X is out of the running in this question? What's your
Oh, good question.
go-to? It can either be generic or something nuanced we've never heard of.
I've been using Gamma a lot actually. So I
Okay,
don't know
yeah.
if you have heard of Gamma.
Yeah.
So they do
Presentation
PowerPoint
tool. Yeah.
generation. Yeah. So I like Gamma. And then Fireflies has just become something that I cannot live without either. I think that's something
That's
that
the
everyone
recording
has been, yeah, the
meeting
meeting
tool, right?
recording
Okay.
and kind of notes. I think that has been such a game changer in like remembering action items from meetings
Yeah.
and being able to like months later refer back to cool information about customers. So that one has been a game
Let me
changer.
ask you about Gamma. Are you, because I played with it a lot. I like to reference it in trainings and workshops and things, but have you gotten to the point where you're using their paid plan and you can use your existing design templates and things like that and work it in there? Like, what are your thoughts if
Yeah,
you have
I
used it to that extent?
Yeah, no, I've started tinkering with it and then I actually just subscribed to the paid plan maybe like a couple of
Yeah.
weeks ago. So yeah, I think it's cool because the beginning is a little bit clunky because it doesn't do then exactly what you ask for, or you have to get the gist for it, but it's just so much more efficient. I used to do a lot of really beautiful presentations in Figma when I
Yeah.
needed to, and then just takes so much time to edit every little thing.
Yeah.
So it's a great like 80% with 20% of the effort type of
Yeah.
thing. I think obviously when you want something that's incredibly precise, you still need a tool that allows you more of that
Yeah.
control. But for things that you want to whip up and you already know more or less you want it to look like or the information, I think it's great.
It's funny. It's like a TikTok and Instagram video on McKinsey. They came out with their version of this,
I saw,
and it's basically a tool that makes like pretty PowerPoints, and it went like completely viral, and the comments were hilarious because that's
go
what they're
for
known
it.
for, making pretty PowerPoints.
Yeah, of
And now
course. And
AI
they're like,
is
oh my God,
taking
they
their job.
automated even that. No, that's
Yeah.
so funny. That's hilarious. And then another one that's like less of a, let's say, work tool, but a product that I've been tinkering with is Tolan from Portola. I don't know if you've used it. It's more of a
I hadn't heard
consumer
of it. How do
app.
you spell it?
Tolan.
Oh,
I saw
okay.
it's been popping off and I was playing around with it. And I think it's so well done. It's basically like a companion like ChatGPT that has a really cute
Oh,
character and is
yeah, yeah.
gamified. And it's just so well executed and really beautiful, I think, and also how it was designed. More of a playful product, but that's I think super fun. And I think we're gonna start seeing a lot more of those companion type things that tend to be more personified and this mix between AI chat and gaming. Yeah, that's
This
it.
right here. Yeah. It
Right.
looks like a Tamagotchi, but AI.
Yeah,
The new
exactly.
Tamagotchi,
That's
I guess.
exactly what it is. It's a Tamagotchi AI. So I think we don't do that much stuff related to gaming, but the gaming industry is one that I'm so excited to see what will happen with AI.
Yeah.
Because I think it'll become a lot more of this game that's super personalized, but also you can gamify things that usually weren't gamified. So yeah, I'm excited for that one.
So many cool things, so many cool products coming in. Yeah, I'm here for it. But thanks for talking some AI. Where can people find Exa? Where can they find you? Where can they try out websites if they want to?
Yeah, you can just go to exa.ai, which is exa.ai, or for websites, it's websites.exa.ai. And by the way, if you guys want to try the tool, I'll give you a code if anyone wants to try it, which is Perfect Search. That will
Oh,
basically give
cool.
you a 2-week free trial of the Pro plan. So check it out. Yeah, that's right.
Nice. Getting the perks for listening to
Ah,
talking AI there. Yeah, it's a cool tool. So try websites and there it is.
yeah. And you can find me
get
on
a
LinkedIn
nice.
as well if you want to connect. I always love chatting about AI tools, how we're running internal processes. So definitely feel free to reach out.
Awesome. Thanks for talking some AI.
Cool. Of course. Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Talking AI podcast. If you enjoyed the show, give us a follow or subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. And don't forget to leave us a review. We love those. For more info on Talking AI, visit talkingaipodcast.com.